The black water was warm against her skin as Marlena Vance broke the surface without a sound. 60 meters behind her, the outpost lights glowed orange against the jungle darkness. 12 armed guards, 3 watchtowers, 1 high-value target who had evaded capture for 7 years. The SEAL team was still 40 minutes out. Command had said wait for backup, but Command did not know what she knew. In 90 seconds, everyone in that outpost would be dead, and not a single shot would be fired. 72 hours earlier, Norfolk, Virginia. The fluorescent lights in Building 7 hummed with the same tired frequency they had hummed for the past 3 years. Chief Petty Officer Marlena Vance sat at her desk in the Communication Support Office, surrounded by equipment manifests and transfer requests that nobody would read until next quarter. She was 38 years old. Her uniform was pressed. Her hair was pulled back in a regulation bun. And every single person who walked past her desk looked through her like she was furniture. Before we continue, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. Maybe you know someone whose true abilities were never recognized. The office was nearly empty at 1700 hours. Most of the day's shift had already filed out, eager to escape the soul-crushing monotony of administrative naval life. Marlena preferred the quiet. Fewer people meant fewer questions. Fewer questions meant fewer lies she had to tell about who she was and what she had done before they assigned her to this beige purgatory. A crash echoed from the hallway. Then laughter, the cruel kind. Marlena's fingers paused over her keyboard. She listened. More laughter. A voice, young and female, saying something too quiet to make out. Then a male voice, loud and mocking. Come on, Boot. Show us what you got. She was on her feet before she made the conscious decision to move. The hallway opened into a small break area where 3 second-class petty officers had cornered a young woman against the vending machines. Petty Officer, second class, Janelle Kim. Marlena recognized her from the morning muster. Fresh from a school, 20 years old. The only woman assigned to the Technical Support Division this rotation. One of the men was holding her cover above his head while the others blocked her path. Janelle's face was red, her jaw tight, trying to maintain composure while they dangled her dignity just out of reach. Just grab it, one of them taunted. What is the matter? Too short. Marlena did not announce herself. She simply walked into the space between the men and the young sailor, her presence so quiet and sudden that the one holding the cover actually flinched. Gentlemen, she said. Her voice was not loud. It did not need to be. There was something in her stillness that made all 3 of them take a half step back without understanding why. Chief, we were just messing around, the tallest one said. His name, Tape Red Donovan. No harm done. Marlena held out her hand. The cover. Now, Donovan hesitated. He outweighed her by 80 pounds. He was 15 years younger. Every instinct in his body was telling him he did not have to listen to this quiet woman from the communications office. But something in her eyes made him place the cover in her palm. Marlena handed it to Janelle without looking away from Donovan. I believe you 3 have somewhere else to be. They left. Not quickly, because that would have been admitting defeat, but they left. Janelle stood frozen against the vending machine, clutching her cover. Thank you, Chief, she whispered. Marlena finally turned to look at her. The hardness in her expression softened just slightly. You did nothing wrong. Remember that. And if it happens again, you come find me. Building 7. Communications Support. Janelle nodded. She opened her mouth to say something else, but Marlena was already walking away, disappearing back into the fluorescent maze like she had never been there at all. The base pool closed at 2100, but Marlena had a key. She had a key because she had asked for one 3 years ago, and the recreation officer had given it to her without question. She came here every night, always alone, always after dark. The water was cool and still, reflecting the emergency lights in long ripples as she lowered herself in. She did not swim laps. She did not exercise in any way the Navy would recognize. She simply sank to the bottom of the 12-foot end and sat there in the silence, letting the pressure wrap around her like an old friend. For minutes passed, then 5, then 6. Her lungs did not burn the way normal lungs burned. Her body did not panic the way normal bodies panicked. She had trained it not to. She had spent 2 years in a program that did not exist, teaching it to survive in places where survival was not supposed to be possible. At 7 minutes, she finally rose, broke the surface without gasping, floated on her back, and stared at the ceiling. This was the only place she felt like herself anymore. Her phone buzzed against the tile. She ignored it. It buzzed again and again. She swam to the edge and checked the screen. Blocked number. 3 missed calls in the last minute. On the 4th ring, she answered. The voice on the other end was older now, rougher, but unmistakable. A voice she had not heard in 5 years. A voice that belonged to the woman who had built her into what she was and then watched the world tear it all down. Marlena, it is Catherine Cross. I am dying, and I need you to do one last thing that does not exist. The house sat at the end of a quiet street in Virginia Beach, a modest colonial that gave no indication of the woman who lived inside. Marlena parked her car and sat for a moment, hands still on the wheel. She had not seen Catherine Cross in 5 years, had not spoken to her since the day they shut everything down and told them both to forget. The front door opened before she reached the porch. A home health aide in blue scrubs nodded at her and stepped aside. Admiral Cross is in the study. She insisted on getting dressed for your visit. It took her 40 minutes. The study smelled like old books and medication. Catherine Cross sat in a leather chair by the window, wrapped in a navy cardigan despite the warmth. She had been a tall woman once, broad-shouldered and commanding. Now, she looked like someone had let the air out of her. Her skin was papery thin. Her eyes, though, her eyes were exactly the same, sharp and calculating and missing nothing. You look good, Marlena, she said. Soft living agrees with you. Marlena took the chair across from her. You look like death. Cross laughed, which turned into a cough, which turned into a grimace. Pancreatic cancer. 3 months ago, they said I had 6 months. Now they say I have weeks. Apparently, I was never very good at following timelines. Why am I here, Admiral? Cross studied her for a long moment. Because there's a man named Alexei Voronov who has been running a terrorist financing network for the past 12 years. He funds attacks across 3 continents. Bombings, assassinations, chemical weapons procurement. The intelligence community has been hunting him for a decade. Marlena waited. 6 weeks ago, we finally found him. A compound in the Philippine jungle, on a river inlet about 40 miles from any major population center. Remote, heavily fortified, and impossible to approach without detection. If the intelligence community found him, they will send a team. They have sent 3 teams, Cross said. Navy SEALs, Delta, even a joint task force with Philippines Special Operations. Every single one was detected before they got within half a mile. Voronov has early warning systems, informants in the local population, and an extraction protocol that can have him gone in under 10 minutes. The jungle is too dense for effective aerial assault. The river approach is mined. Every angle has been tried. Every angle except one. Cross smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. It was the smile of a woman who had spent her entire career finding ways to do impossible things. Underwater insertion. 1.2 miles through a river system with 0 visibility. Emerging inside the compound perimeter without detection. Eliminating the guards silently. Securing the target before he can run. That is a suicide mission. For most people. Cross leaned forward, and for a moment Marlena saw a ghost of the woman she had been. But you are not most people, Marlena. You are one of 4 people in the world who could make that approach. 3 of them are dead. You are the 4th. Marlena stood and walked to the window. Outside, a neighbor was watering his lawn, completely unaware of the conversation happening 30 feet away. I am a communications technician. I process equipment manifests. I have not been operational in 5 years. Because they made you stop. Because small-minded men decided that what we built was too controversial, too dangerous, too embarrassing to acknowledge. They buried the program, and they buried you with it. And now you want to dig me up. Cross was quiet for a moment. Then she reached into the folder beside her chair and pulled out a photograph. She held it out to Marlena without a word. Marlena took it. She already knew what she would see before she looked. A young man in marine dress blues. Dark hair, easy smile. The same stubborn jaw she saw in the mirror every morning. Corporal Daniel Vance, her younger brother. Voronov funded the Ankara bombing, Cross said quietly. The one that killed 14 Marines in 2019, including Daniel. Marlena's hand did not tremble. Her face did not change, but something behind her eyes went very still. I know you've spent 5 years trying to bury what you are, Cross continued. I know they told you to forget. I know you have convinced yourself that the desk and the paperwork and the invisibility are enough. But I also know that every single night you go to that pool and you sink to the bottom and you remember what it felt like to be extraordinary. Marlena said nothing. I am dying. I cannot change what they did to the program. I cannot give you back the years they stole. But I can give you this. One mission. The man who funded your brother's death. No oversight. No bureaucracy. No one telling you that you cannot exist. And if I say no, then I will die knowing I failed you twice. Cross's voice cracked slightly. Once when I could not protect the program, and once when I could not give you the ending you deserve. Marlena looked at the photograph in her hand for a long time. Daniel had been 24 when he died. He used to call her Ghost because she could move through a room without anyone noticing she had been there. He was the only person outside the program who knew what she really was. She had not told him everything, but he had known enough. How do I get there? Cross exhaled slowly. There's a joint task force staging in the Philippines. They need technical support staff. I still have friends who owe me favors. You will be attached as a communications specialist. And when I get there, you will find a way. You always did. Marlena tucked the photograph into her pocket. She did not say goodbye. She did not thank Cross for the opportunity. She simply walked toward the door. Marlena. She stopped. The water remembers you, even if everyone else forgot. Marlena did not turn around. She walked out of the house, past the aide, past her car, all the way to the end of the street before she let herself feel anything at all. Then she pulled out her phone and requested emergency leave. The staging base outside Manila was a study in controlled chaos. Helicopters thundered overhead at irregular intervals. Teams of operators moved between temporary structures with a focused intensity of men who knew their mission could launch at any moment. Marlena stepped off the transport with her single duffel bag and felt the humid air wrap around her like a wet blanket. A young petty officer met her on the tarmac. Chief Vance, I am Petty Officer Reese. I am supposed to take you to the communications tent. Communications tent. Of course. She followed Reese through the compound, noting everything. Guard positions, patrol patterns, the location of the armory and the tactical operations center. Old habits she had never managed to kill, no matter how many years she spent behind a desk. The communications tent was exactly what she expected. Banks of equipment. 3 technicians who barely looked up when she entered. A corner desk with a chair that had seen better days. This was where they put people who did not matter. Lieutenant Commander Osei wants to see you when you get settled, Reese said. He is leading the task force. Marlena set her bag down. Take me to him now. Reese hesitated. He said when you get settled. I'm settled. The Tactical Operations Center was a larger tent filled with maps, monitors, and the quiet tension of a mission going badly. Lieutenant Commander Derek Osei stood at the central table, surrounded by men who looked like they had not slept in days. He was tall and broad, with the kind of physicality that came from years of operational work. His eyes found Marlena as soon as she entered, and his expression made it clear he was not impressed by what he saw. Chief Vance. Osei's voice was flat. You are the technical support specialist Admiral Cross sent us. I am. One of the other operators snorted. Osei shot him a look, then turned back to Marlena. With respect, Chief, I am not sure what the Admiral was thinking. We are running a Tier 1 operation here. We need operators, not desk personnel. Marlena said nothing. She simply walked to the central table and looked at the maps spread across its surface. The compound was marked in red. The river approach was highlighted in blue. 3 failed insertion points were marked with black X symbols. Your last approach came from the northwest, she said. You followed the main river channel and attempted insertion at this bend here. Osei frowned. How do you know that? Because it is the obvious approach. Deep water, natural cover, minimal exposure time. Any competent team would try it first. She traced her finger along the map. But the current at that bend shifts direction twice daily with the tidal influence. You went in during the eastern flow, which pushed you toward the sensor array on the south bank. The room had gone quiet. Osei stepped closer. The tidal data we have shows consistent western flow in that section. Your tidal data is 12 hours off. Marlena looked up at him. Whoever compiled your intelligence used the standard Philippine tide tables, but this river system has a unique hydraulic pattern due to the upstream dam releases. The actual flow reverses 6 hours earlier than the table suggests. Osei stared at her. One of his men was already pulling up data on a laptop. After a long moment, the man looked up. She is right. The dam release schedule shifts everything. We went in at exactly the wrong time. Silence filled the tent. Who are you? Osei said slowly. And do not tell me you are a communications technician. Marlena held his gaze. I am exactly what Admiral Cross sent you. Whether you choose to use me properly is your decision. She turned and walked out before he could respond. The evening brought cooler air and the relentless sound of insects. Marlena found a quiet spot near the water, a small inlet where the river met the base perimeter. She stood at the edge and let the darkness settle around her. Footsteps behind her. She did not turn. Reese stopped a few feet away. The guys are talking about what happened in the TOC. Nobody can figure out how you knew about the tidal patterns. Marlena watched the water. I read the intelligence reports on the flight over. The error was obvious. Obvious to who? Reese moved closer. I have been on 3 deployments. I have never seen anyone break down an operational failure like that in 30 seconds. Then you've been working with the wrong people. Reese was quiet for a moment. Can I ask you something? You just did. He almost smiled. Why are you really here? Admiral Cross does not send communications technicians to Tier 1 staging bases. And you do not move like someone who spent her life behind a desk. Marlena finally turned to look at him. He was young, maybe 26, with the earnest intensity of someone who still believed the world made sense. She remembered being that young. She remembered believing that skill and dedication were enough to build a career on. How long can you hold your breath? She asked. Reese blinked at the change of subject. I do not know. Maybe 90 seconds? 2 minutes if I really push it. Marlena nodded slowly. Then she turned and walked into the water. It rose to her ankles, her knees, her waist. Reese called after her, asking what she was doing, but she did not answer. She simply took one long breath and slipped beneath the surface. The water was warm and dark, filled with sediment that reduced visibility 2 inches. She sank to the bottom and let herself settle into the silence. 1 minute passed, then 2, then 3. Above her, she could hear the muffled sound of Reese's voice, increasingly panicked. For minutes. 5 minutes. Her lungs burned, but distantly, like pain happening to someone else. 6 minutes. She heard splashing, Reese preparing to dive in after her. She surfaced without gasping, rose from the water like she had simply been waiting for the right moment. Reese stood knee-deep in the river, his face pale. What the hell was that? Marlena waded past him toward the shore. Long enough, she said. That is how long I can hold my breath. Word spread through the base like wildfire. By morning, every operator on the task force had heard some version of the story. The communications technician who had corrected their intelligence. The quiet woman who had walked into the river and stayed under for 6 minutes without coming up for air. Marlena ignored the stares. She had spent 5 years being invisible. Being watched was just another kind of camouflage. Osei found her in the communications tent shortly after dawn. He stood in the entrance for a moment, studying her like she was a puzzle he could not solve. Then he stepped inside and let the flap fall closed behind him. I made some calls last night, he said. Try to pull your service record. Marlena did not look up from her equipment manifest. And there is nothing there. Basic training. A school. 3 years of unremarkable postings. No deployments. No commendations. No disciplinary actions. You're the most boring sailor in the entire Navy. Some people live quiet lives. Osei pulled a chair over and sat down across from her. But that is not you, is it? I watched you walk into that TOC yesterday. You cataloged every exit, every weapon, every person in the room before you said a single word. That is not something they teach in communication school. Marlena finally met his eyes. What do you want, Commander? I want to know who I am really dealing with. Because Admiral Cross does not burn favors to send me a paper pusher, and paper pushers do not hold their breath for 6 minutes. Before Marlena could respond, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and felt something cold settle in her stomach. A message from Master Chief Reyes back in Norfolk. Harlan is asking questions. Filed an inquiry about your emergency leave. Watch your back. Commander Victor Harlan. The name alone was enough to tighten her jaw. Problem? Osei asked. Marlena pocketed her phone. Nothing I cannot handle. But she knew that was not true. Harlan had been waiting 5 years for an opportunity to destroy her. Now she had given him one. The memory came unbidden. A training pool in an underground facility that officially did not exist. 12 women treading water while evaluators watched from above. Harlan had been one of them, a lieutenant commander at the time, assigned to assess whether the program was worth continued funding. He had failed her on a technicality. Said her psychological profile showed instability. Said she was a risk. The real reason was simpler. She had outperformed his own SEAL qualification scores in every underwater metric. He could not stand being shown up by a woman in a program he did not believe should exist. She had appealed. She had won, and Harlan had never forgiven her. Now he sat in Norfolk with the power to end her career, and she was halfway around the world trying to complete a mission that would never officially happen. The day passed in tense preparation. The task force was planning another insertion attempt, but the mood was grim. 3 failures had shaken their confidence. Voronov's early warning systems seemed impenetrable. Marlena spent the afternoon studying the river maps, tracing routes that no one else would consider. The main channels were too exposed. The tributaries were too shallow. But there, in the sediment data, she found something interesting. An old drainage system from a colonial-era plantation. Mostly collapsed, but with sections still intact. It ran within 200 meters of the compound's eastern perimeter. She was still studying the maps when Reese appeared at her side. "You have not eaten anything today," he said. "I'm not hungry." He set a protein bar on the table beside her. "The guys are saying you are some kind of ghost. That the Navy has secret programs nobody knows about." Marlena almost smiled. "The Navy has a lot of things nobody knows about. Is that what you are? Some kind of secret weapon they kept hidden?" She thought about the question. About the 12 women who had started the program and the 3 who had finished. About the missions that had never been recorded and the bodies that had never been recovered. About 2 years of training that had pushed her past every limit she thought she had. "I'm just a communications technician," she said. "Remember?" Reese shook his head. "You know what I think? I think you're exactly what we need to finish this mission. I just cannot figure out why they have you sitting in a tent instead of leading the insertion. Because some people do not believe women belong in combat roles. Because acknowledging what I can do would mean admitting the program existed. Because it is easier to bury us than explain us." She did not say any of that. She just looked at the map and traced the drainage route with her finger. That night, another message from Norfolk. Harlan had escalated his inquiry. He was citing her absence during a critical equipment audit, claiming she had shown signs of psychological instability before her departure, requesting authorization to flag her for immediate recall. Marlena stood outside the communications tent and stared at the stars. Somewhere out there, Voronov was sleeping peacefully in his compound, protected by sensors and guards and the certainty that no one could reach him. Somewhere back home, Harlan was building a case to destroy everything she had left. She had maybe 48 hours before the recall order came through. 48 hours to find a way into that compound and complete a mission that 3 teams of elite operators had failed to accomplish. She thought about Daniel, about his easy smile and the way he used to call her ghost, about the flag they had given her mother at his funeral. Then she walked back into the tent and started planning. The briefing room fell silent when Marlena walked in. Osei stood at the head of the table, surrounded by his team. Maps covered every surface. The failed insertion points glared up at them like accusations. "Chief Vance," Osei said, "I did not request your presence at this briefing." "No, but you need me here anyway." She moved to the table before anyone could stop her, pulled the river map to the center, and pointed to a thin line that most of them had probably dismissed as irrelevant. "Colonial drainage system," she said, "built in 1920 by a Dutch plantation owner. Most of it collapsed decades ago, but satellite thermal imaging shows sections that are still intact. This section here runs within 200 meters of the compound's eastern perimeter." One of the operators leaned forward. "That is a storm drain. It is maybe 3 feet wide. 2.8 feet at its narrowest point," Marlena confirmed. "Too small for standard dive equipment. Too narrow for a two-man team. But possible for a single operator with minimal gear." Osei crossed his arms. Even if someone could navigate that system, they would emerge outside the sensor perimeter. The guards would detect them before they got within 50 meters of the compound. Not if they stayed in the water. Marlena traced her finger along the map. "The drainage system empties into this retention pond on the compound's eastern edge. From there, it is another 300 meters through the main river channel to the dock area. All underwater. All inside the perimeter. You're talking about 1.5 miles of underwater navigation," another operator said. "In zero visibility. With no communication and no backup. 1.2 miles. And yes," the room erupted. Voices overlapped, dismissing the plan as impossible, suicidal, the fantasy of someone who had never seen real combat. Marlena let them talk. She had heard it all before. Osei held up his hand, and the noise stopped. "Even if this approach were theoretically possible," he said slowly, "we do not have anyone who could execute it. Our combat divers are good, but this is beyond their capabilities. I could do it." The silence that followed was different, heavier. Osei stared at her. "You're a communications technician. I'm also one of 3 surviving graduates of Project Phantom Tide." Marlena kept her voice flat, clinical. "An experimental program developed to create underwater combat specialists capable of extended submersion operations. We trained for 2 years in conditions that would kill most divers. Solo infiltration through zero visibility waterways was our primary mission profile." Nobody spoke. The program was terminated in 2019 due to political concerns about women in direct combat roles. All records were classified, and all graduates were reassigned to non-operational positions. She paused. "I have been processing equipment manifests in Norfolk for 5 years. But I still hold my breath for over 7 minutes. I still navigate by touch and current in complete darkness. And I'm the only person on this base who can make that approach." Osei looked at his men, then back at Marlena. "Why should I believe any of this?" "Because Admiral Cross sent me. Because your 3 failed insertions prove that conventional approaches will not work. And because Alexei Voronov funded the bombing that killed my brother." The last statement hung in the air. She had not meant to say it, had not meant to make this personal in front of strangers. But the words were out now, and she could not take them back. Osei studied her for a long moment. The skepticism in his eyes was warring with something else. Desperation, maybe, or the recognition that he was out of options. Before he could respond, Reese burst through the tent flap. "Commander, message from Norfolk. They are recalling Chief Vance. Military police are being dispatched to escort her back to the States." Marlena felt the floor shift beneath her. "On what grounds?" Reese's face was grim. "Psychological instability. Commander Harlan submitted an emergency evaluation request. He is claiming you are a danger to yourself and others." The team exchanged glances. Whatever credibility she had built in the last 5 minutes was evaporating. Osei's jaw tightened. "When do the MPs arrive?" "For hours. Maybe less. For hours. Not enough time to plan a proper insertion. Not enough time to prove herself. Not enough time for anything except watching Harlan win from 6,000 miles away." She thought about Daniel. About Admiral Cross dying in her chair in Virginia Beach. About 12 women who had trained in secret to become something extraordinary, only to be erased because powerful men found them inconvenient. Something hardened inside her. "Commander," she said, If I'm going to be court-martialed anyway, I might as well give them something worth court-martialing me for. Osei looked at her, really looked at her. Then he turned to Reese. Delay those MPs. Equipment malfunction, communication breakdown, I do not care what excuse you use. Buy us time. Sir, you heard me. He turned back to Marlena. You have 4 hours to prove you are not insane. Show me what you can do. The base pool was nothing like the river she would have to navigate. It was clean, chlorinated, well lit. But it was the only controlled environment available, and Osei needed to see what she could do. His team lined the edges of the pool, arms crossed, faces skeptical. They had seen combat divers before. They had trained with the best the Navy had to offer. None of them believed this quiet woman from communications was about to show them anything they had not seen. Marlena stood at the pool's edge in a standard wetsuit. No tanks, no mask, nothing but the suit and a dive knife strapped to her thigh. She rolled her shoulders once and controlled her breathing. For counts in, for counts hold, for counts out. The rhythm was as familiar as her own heartbeat. 7 minutes, Osei said. You claimed you can hold your breath for 7 minutes. 7 minutes, 40 seconds. Under optimal conditions. Show me. She dove. The water closed over her head, and the world went silent. She sank to the bottom of the 12-foot end and settled into a sitting position, legs crossed, hands resting on her knees. Above her, the surface rippled with distorted light. Shapes moved along the edges. The team watching, waiting for her to fail. 1 minute passed. Her heart rate slowed to 42 beats per minute. A normal person's would be racing by now, burning through oxygen, triggering the panic response that made drowning such a terrible way to die. But Marlena's body had been trained to ignore those signals, to treat the burning in her lungs as information rather than emergency. 2 minutes. 3. She could see Osei checking his watch, could see the operators shifting their weight, exchanging glances. 3 minutes was impressive for an untrained civilian. For combat diver, it was merely competent. For minutes. Now, they were paying attention. For minutes without surfacing, without movement, without any sign of distress. One of the younger operators crouched at the pool's edge, peering down at her through the water. 5 minutes. The burning in her chest was a distant thing now, a sensation she acknowledged and dismissed. Her vision remained clear. Her mind remained calm. This was what 2 years of training had given her. Not just physical capability, but the mental architecture to survive when every instinct screamed for air. 6 minutes. Osei was no longer checking his watch. He was staring at her with an expression she had seen only once before on Admiral Cross's face the day Marlena had completed her final qualification dive. It was the look of someone watching the impossible become real. 6 minutes, 30 seconds. Her lungs were fire now, but fire she controlled. She had gone longer than this in training, had pushed past 8 minutes in the pressure tanks where the darkness was absolute and the cold seeped into her bones. This was nothing. This was a swimming pool in the Philippines with good lighting and warm water. 7 minutes. She rose slowly, deliberately, pushing off the bottom and ascending without urgency. She broke the surface at 7 minutes and 12 seconds and took her first breath without gasping, without desperation, just a long, slow inhale like she had merely been waiting for the right moment. The pool deck was silent. Osei walked to the edge and looked down at her. What else can you do? Over the next 2 hours, she showed them. Navigation in blackout conditions, the pool lights killed, moving from end to end using only touch and spatial memory. Silent swimming techniques that left no wake, no ripple, no sign of her passage. Close quarters combat adapted for underwater engagement, movements that were slow and deliberate above the surface but devastating below it. She showed them how to kill a man without making sound, how to disable a sentry before he could reach his radio, how to move through water like it was her natural element, because after 2 years of phantom tide training, it was. When she finally climbed out of the pool, the skepticism was gone from their faces. In its place was something that looked almost like fear. Osei handed her a towel. I need to know everything about this program, everything about your training, everything about why they shut it down. Marlena dried her face. They shut it down because of men like Commander Harlan. Men who could not accept that women might be better suited for certain operations than they were. She met his eyes. Phantom-tied, recruited specifically for traits that occur more frequently in women. Lung capacity relative to body mass. Thermoregulation efficiency. Pain tolerance. The ability to remain calm under extreme physiological stress. We were not diversity hires. We were the optimal candidates for a specific mission profile. And Harlan? Harlan was on the evaluation committee. He failed me on a psychological assessment because my performance made his own SEAL washout look worse by comparison. I appealed. I won. The program continued for another year before political pressure shut it down entirely. She paused. He has been waiting 5 years for a chance to bury me. This mission is that chance. Osei was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned to his team. I need options for delaying those MPs. And I need a full mission brief ready in 2 hours. He looked back at Marlena. If we are going to do this, we're going to do it right. The mission brief was held in a supply tent at the far edge of the base, away from prying eyes and official channels. Osei had handpicked 6 operators he trusted to keep their mouths shut. Reese stood by the entrance, watching for any sign of the military police. Marlena spread the maps across a folding table and walked them through every meter of the approach. The drainage system entrance was 2 miles upriver from the compound. She would enter at dusk when the light was failing and visibility in the water was at its worst. The first 800 meters were relatively straightforward, following the main river channel before diverting into the colonial drainage system. This section is the most dangerous, she said, pointing to a narrow stretch on the map. The tunnel is partially collapsed. I will have to navigate by touch, moving debris as I go. If I get stuck, there's no way to call for help and no room to turn around. One of the operators shook his head. You're talking about crawling through an underwater tomb. I have done worse. She continued the brief. After clearing the drainage system, she would emerge into the retention pond inside the compound perimeter. From there, 300 meters of open water to the dock area. The guards rotated on predictable schedules. She would have a 4-minute window to exit the water, neutralize the dock sentries, and move into the compound interior. And then, Osei asked, and then I find Voronov. Marlena's voice was flat. The intelligence says he sleeps in the main building, 2nd floor, northeast corner. I will confirm his location, eliminate any guards between me and the target, and complete the objective. Eliminate. Osei studied her. You mean kill. I mean what I said. The room was quiet. These men had all killed before. They understood the weight of it, the way it changed you. But there was something in Marlena's voice that went beyond professional detachment. Something cold and patient and very, very old. What about extraction? Reese asked. Marlena looked at him. If everything goes well, I will signal from the compound and your team can move in to secure the site. If things go badly, you will not need to extract anyone. That is not acceptable, Osei said. I am not sending you in without an extraction plan. You are not sending me anywhere, Commander. I am going because this is what I was built to do. Your job is to be ready when I am finished. Before Osei could argue, his radio crackled. The MPs had landed. They were on base, asking questions, demanding to know where Chief Vance was being held. Time was up. Marlena gathered the maps and handed them to Reese. Memorize these and then destroy them. I leave in 30 minutes. The next half hour was a blur of preparation. Wet suit, black and unmarked, designed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Dive knife with a ceramic blade that would not trigger metal detectors. A waterproof sleeve containing a small camera for target confirmation and a single cyanide capsule in case capture became imminent. She did not plan to use the capsule, but she was not naive enough to go without it. Osei found her at the water's edge as the sun began its descent toward the jungle canopy. The river stretched before them, brown and slow and deceptively peaceful. I looked up the Anchor bombing, he said quietly. 14 Marines. Your brother was the youngest. Marlena did not respond. This is not just a mission for you. This is personal. She finally turned to look at him. Every mission is personal for someone, Commander. That does not make it less necessary. Ose was quiet for a moment. When this is over, assuming we both survive, I'm going to recommend you for reinstatement to operational status. What they did to you, burying you in that office, it was wrong. It was 5 years ago. It does not matter anymore. It matters to me. He extended his hand. Come back alive, Chief. That is an order. She shook his hand once, firmly. Then she turned and waded into the water without looking back. The river was warm and murky, exactly as she remembered from the intelligence reports. She moved along the bank until she was chest deep, then paused to center herself. For counts in, for counts hold, for counts out. The breathing rhythm that had carried her through 2 years of training and a dozen missions that did not exist. Behind her, she could hear the distant sound of vehicles. The MPs searching the base, looking for a ghost they would never find. She thought about Admiral Cross, dying in her leather chair, asking for one last impossible thing. She thought about Daniel, 24 years old forever, buried in Arlington with a flag and a lie about how he died. She thought about the 12 women who had trained beside her, only 2 of whom had lived long enough to be erased. Then she filled her lungs with air, slipped beneath the surface, and disappeared into the darkness. The black water closed over her head like a door swinging shut. The world above ceased to exist. There was only the current, the pressure, and the mission waiting at the other end. 1.2 miles to target. No communication. No backup. No margin for error. She began to swim. The first 800 meters were almost peaceful. Marlena moved through the main river channel with long, efficient strokes, conserving oxygen, letting the current do most of the work. The water was warm and thick with sediment, visibility reduced to inches. She navigated by feel, by the pressure changes against her skin, by the internal compass she had spent 2 years calibrating in darker waters than this. She surfaced once at the 400-meter mark, in a pocket of air beneath an overhanging root system. 3 breaths, slow and controlled, then back under. The entrance to the drainage system appeared as a darker shadow against the already dark water. A concrete mouth half-choked with debris and river vegetation. She paused at the threshold, letting her fingers trace the edges. The intelligence had estimated 2.8 feet at the narrowest point. Her shoulders were 17 inches across. It would be tight but possible. She entered the tunnel. The darkness inside was absolute. Not the dim murk of the river, but true blackness, the kind that pressed against your eyes and made your brain invent shapes to fill the void. She moved forward on her stomach, pulling herself along the bottom of the pipe, feeling for obstructions before they could trap her. The first collapse came at the 200-meter mark. A section of pipe had buckled inward, reducing the passage to less than 2 feet. She had to exhale completely, compressing her chest to squeeze through. The concrete scraped against her back. For a moment she was stuck, wedged in the darkness with no room to move forward or back. She did not panic. Panic was a luxury she had trained out of herself years ago. Instead, she went limp, letting her body find the path of least resistance, inching forward millimeter by millimeter until the passage widened again. Her lungs were burning now. She had been under for nearly 4 minutes. The first air pocket should be close. She found it at the 250-meter mark, a section where the pipe had cracked and an air bubble had formed against the ceiling. She pressed her face into the pocket and took 3 careful breaths. The air was stale and tasted like rust, but it was oxygen, and that was all that mattered. 3 more breaths, then back under. The next section was worse. The colonial engineers had built the drainage system to handle plantation runoff, not to last a century. Roots had penetrated the concrete in dozens of places, creating a maze of organic obstacles. She moved through them by touch, her fingers reading the environment like braille. At the 400-meter mark, she found the body. It was wedged against a collapsed section, wrapped in chains that had rusted into the bones. A man, based on the size of the skull. Dead for years, maybe decades. Someone Voronov had killed and dumped, letting the drainage system become a tomb. Marlena paused. In the absolute darkness, She could not see the remains, but she could feel them. The chains, the bones, the weight of a life ended and discarded like garbage. She thought about Daniel, about whether anyone had held his body after the bomb, about whether he had been afraid. Then she pushed past the corpse and kept moving. The tunnel began to ascend at the 600-meter mark. The water grew shallower, the air pockets more frequent. She was approaching the retention pond, approaching the compound, approaching the point of no return. Her final air stop was in a section where the pipe had completely collapsed, creating a small underground chamber. She surfaced in darkness, so complete it felt solid. The silence was absolute. No sound from above, no indication of what waited beyond the final stretch of tunnel. She floated in the blackness and let herself rest for 30 seconds. Her muscles ached. Her lungs felt scraped raw from the stale air. She had been in the water for over 40 minutes, navigating by touch through a passage that would have killed most divers in the first 100 meters. But she was close now. So close. She thought about Admiral Cross, about the look on her face when she had asked for this one last mission, about the woman who had built her into a weapon and then watched the world decide that weapons like her should not exist. She thought about Harlan back in Norfolk, so certain he had one, so certain she would come back in handcuffs and disgrace. She thought about the 12 guards waiting above her, the 3 watchtowers, the man who slept peacefully in his compound, protected by sensors and soldiers, and the absolute certainty that no one could reach him. He was wrong. Marlena filled her lungs one final time and slipped back beneath the surface. The last stretch of tunnel was ahead, then the retention pond, then the compound, then Voronov. The water was warmer here, heated by the sun-baked concrete of the compound above. She could feel the change in pressure as the tunnel opened into the wider space of the pond. She slowed her pace, moving with exaggerated care. Any sound now could alert the guards. Any ripple could end the mission before it began. She emerged into the retention pond like a shadow taking form. The water was dark, but not black, faint moonlight filtering down from somewhere above. She oriented herself against the concrete edge of the pond and looked up. The compound lights glowed orange against the jungle night. She could hear voices speaking in a language she did not recognize. Footsteps on wooden planks. The distant crackle of a radio. 12 guards. 3 watchtowers. 1 target. She had trained her entire adult life for this moment. Marlena sank back beneath the surface and began the final approach. The retention pond connected to the main river channel through a narrow inlet. Marlena moved through it like a current, letting the water carry her toward the dock area. Above the surface, the compound hummed with activity. Guards walking their routes. Radios crackling with routine check-ins. The mundane sounds of men who had no idea death was swimming beneath their feet. She reached the dock pilings and paused, pressing herself against the alga-slicked wood. Through the murky water, she could see the distorted glow of lights above. 2 guards on the dock itself, one standing at the edge, looking out at the river, the other leaning against a post, smoking. For a minute window. That was what the intelligence had given her. For minutes between radio check-ins when the guards would not be missed. She waited, counting heartbeats, measuring the rhythm of the footsteps above. The smoking guard finished his cigarette and flicked it into the water. It hissed and died inches from her face. He turned and walked toward the far end of the dock, his footsteps fading. Now, Marlena surfaced behind the remaining guard without a ripple. The water slid off her wetsuit in silence. She was on the dock and moving before he registered the shift in the air behind him. Her hand closed over his mouth. Her knife found the gap between his 3rd and 4th ribs. He stiffened, tried to struggle, but her other arm was already locked around his throat, cutting off the blood to his brain. 8 seconds, and he went limp. She lowered him to the dock and rolled his body into the water, where it sank without a sound. 1 down, 11 to go. The smoking guard was 30 meters away, still facing the jungle. She moved along the dock in a low crouch, her wet feet silent against the weathered wood. He never heard her coming. never felt anything except the sudden pressure of her arm across his windpipe and the cold bite of ceramic against his spine. 2 down. She pulled his body behind a stack of supply crates and checked her watch. 2 minutes left in the window. The watchtowers were the real threat. 3 elevated positions with clear sight lines across the entire compound. Taking them would require speed and precision and a significant amount of luck. She chose the nearest tower first. The guard inside was focused on the jungle perimeter, scanning for threats that would never come from that direction. Marlena climbed the ladder without sound, each movement deliberate, each handhold tested before she committed her weight. She was over the railing before he turned. His eyes went wide. His mouth opened to shout. Neither happened. She drove her palm into his throat, crushing his larynx, then followed with the knife before he could recover. He died staring at her with an expression of absolute disbelief. 3 down, 9 remaining. From the elevated position, she could see the entire compound. The main building where Voronov slept. The barracks where off-duty guards rested. The second and third watchtowers, each manned by a single sentry. She pulled the dead guard's rifle from his hands and checked the scope. The second tower was 80 meters away. The guard inside was drinking from a canteen, his weapon propped against the railing. Marlena did not use the rifle. A gunshot would end the mission instantly. Instead, she climbed down from the tower and moved through the shadows between buildings, circling toward her next target. The compound was poorly designed for internal security. Voronov had focused all his defenses on detecting external threats, never imagining that someone might already be inside. The guards walked their routes with the bored confidence of men who had never been tested. She tested them. The fourth guard died behind the generator's shed. His throat opened before he could reach his radio. The fifth was relieving himself against a wall when she found him. The sixth and seventh were talking near the barracks entrance, so focused on their conversation that they never noticed a shadow moving behind them. By the time she reached the second watchtower, 8 guards were dead, and the compound remained silent. The sentry in the second tower almost saw her. He turned at the wrong moment, some instinct warning him that something was wrong. But instinct was too slow. She was already inside the tower, already moving, already ending him before the warning could become action. 9 down. The third tower was across the compound, near the main building. 2 guards patrolled the area between her position and the target. She would have to go through them to reach Voronov. She dropped from the tower and melted into the darkness. The patrol guards walked in a predictable pattern, circling the main building every 6 minutes. She intercepted them at the northeast corner, where the shadows were deepest and the sight lines from the remaining tower were blocked by a storage structure. The first guard saw her for half a second before she killed him. The second managed to get his hand on his radio before her knife found his throat. The radio clattered to the ground, but no sound escaped his lips. 11 down. 1 tower remaining. The final watchtower guard had noticed something was wrong. He was scanning the compound with increased alertness, his rifle raised, his radio in hand. Marlena did not give him time to use it. She covered the distance in seconds, scaling the tower with brutal efficiency, reaching him just as his finger touched the transmit button. The knife went through his wrist. The radio fell. She finished him before he could scream. 12 down. The compound was silent. She stood in the watchtower and looked at the main building. Second floor, northeast corner. Voronov was waiting, protected by nothing but walls and the illusion of safety. Marlena climbed down and walked toward the door. The main building was colonial architecture corrupted by modern security. Reinforced doors, barred windows, camera systems that would have been impressive if anyone had been alive to monitor them. Marlena entered through a service entrance on the ground floor. The lock was electronic, but the backup was mechanical, and mechanical locks had never been a problem for her. 30 seconds with a tension wrench, and she was inside. The ground floor was administrative. Desks covered in paperwork. Computer terminals dark and silent. She moved through the space without disturbing anything. Her wet footprints the only evidence of her passage. The stairs to the second floor were at the center of the building. She climbed them slowly, testing each step for creaks, keeping her weight distributed and her breathing controlled. At the top, a hallway stretched in both directions. Northeast corner. That was where the intelligence said Voronov would be. 2 more guards. She had miscounted. They stood at the end of the hallway, flanking a heavy wooden door. Professional. Alert. Watching the corridor with the focus of men who knew their principal's life depended on their vigilance. Marlena pressed herself into a doorway and considered her options. The hallway was too long for a silent approach. The guards were too far apart to take simultaneously. Any noise would give Voronov time to escape or arm himself. She reached into her waterproof sleeve and removed the small camera. If she could not reach the target silently, she would have to be fast. She stepped into the hallway. The guards saw her immediately. The first one raised his weapon. The second reached for his radio. Neither completed their action. Marlena covered the distance in 3 seconds. The knife left her hand at the 2-second mark, burying itself in the radio guard's throat. She hit the other guard before he could fire, driving her shoulder into his chest and slamming him against the wall. Her palm found his chin and snapped his head back. He crumpled. 14 down. She retrieved her knife, wiped it clean, and turned to the door. It was unlocked. The room beyond was surprisingly modest. A bed, a desk, a window overlooking the jungle. And, sitting in a chair by that window, a man who looked nothing like a monster. Alexei Voronov was in his 60s, thin and gray, with the kind of face that would disappear in a crowd. He wore reading glasses and held a book in his hands. When Marlena entered, he looked up with an expression of mild curiosity, as if she were a hotel employee arriving with unexpected room service. "You are quieter than the others," he said. His English was accented but precise. "The seals made so much noise I had time for coffee before my men dealt with them. Your men are dead." Voronov nodded slowly. He set the book aside and removed his glasses. "I assumed as much when the radio check stopped. You came through the water." It was not a question. Marlena moved further into the room, keeping the knife visible. The drainage system. 1.2 miles. Impressive. He studied her with unsettling calm. "They told me that approach was impossible. Too narrow. Too long. No one could survive it. I survived it. So you did." He tilted his head. "You are not military. Not in the traditional sense. Something else. Something they do not talk about." Marlena did not respond. She was waiting for him to move, to reach for a weapon, to give her a reason to end this quickly. Instead, he smiled. "You want to know why I'm not afraid?" he said. "It is because I have been expecting this moment for a very long time. Not you specifically, but someone like you. Someone who could reach me when no one else could." He gestured at the room around him. "I have spent 12 years funding operations that killed thousands of people. Americans, Europeans, Africans, Asians. I'm not a fool. I know how stories like mine end." Marlena thought about Daniel, about his easy smile and the way he used to laugh at her jokes even when they were not funny, about the flag they had given her mother and the empty chair at every family gathering since. "You funded the Ankara bombing," she said. 14 Marines. Voronov considered this. "I have funded many bombings. One learns not to keep count. One of them was my brother." For the first time, something flickered across his face. Not fear, not remorse, something closer to recognition. "Ah," he said quietly. "So this is personal. Every mission is personal for someone." He nodded slowly. Then he reached toward the desk beside him. Marlena tensed, but he only picked up a photograph. A young woman with dark hair and serious eyes. "My daughter," he said. "She died in a drone strike in 2015. The Americans called it collateral damage." He set the photograph down. "I am not telling you this to earn sympathy. I am telling you because I want you to understand. There is no such thing as clean war. No such thing as justified killing. There is only violence and the stories we tell ourselves to sleep at night." Marlena crossed the room in 2 steps. She pressed the knife against his throat hard enough to draw a thin line of blood. "I do not need stories," she said. "I need you dead." Voronov met her eyes without flinching. "Then do it. I will not beg. I will not bargain. I have made my peace with what I am." She thought about taking him alive, about the intelligence value he represented, about the networks that might continue operating without his testimony. Then she thought about Daniel, about Admiral Cross dying in Virginia, about 5 years of invisibility and silence, and waiting for a moment that almost never came. The knife moved once, quick and clean. Voronov slumped in his chair, his eyes still open, still calm, still looking at something she could not see. Marlena stood over him for a long moment. Then she raised the camera and photographed his face. Mission complete. The SEAL team arrived 40 minutes later. Marlena heard the helicopters before she saw them, the rhythmic thump of rotors cutting through the jungle night. She was sitting on the dock when they landed, her wetsuit still damp, her knife cleaned and sheathed. Osei was the first one through the compound gates. He swept the area with his weapon raised, then stopped when he saw the bodies. The dock guards floating in the shallows. The patrol guards crumpled in the shadows. The watchtower silent and dark. He lowered his weapon and walked toward her. All of them, he asked. All of them. And Voronov? Second floor. Northeast corner. She did not look at him. I have photographs for confirmation. Osei stood beside her for a long moment, staring at the compound she had single-handedly neutralized. His men were moving through the buildings now, securing the site, cataloging the dead. None of them spoke above a whisper. The silence felt earned. The MPs are still waiting at the staging base, Osei said finally. Harlan has been calling every hour demanding updates on your detention. What did you tell him? That we were experiencing communication difficulties. He almost smiled. Very persistent difficulties. Marlena finally looked at him. What happens now? Now we document everything. Voronov's network, his contacts, his financial records. This compound is an intelligence goldmine. His expression hardened. And then we deal with Harlan. The flight back to the staging base took 2 hours. Marlena spent most of it staring out the window at the darkness below. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind a hollow exhaustion that went deeper than muscle and bone. She had done what she came to do. Voronov was dead. Daniel was avenged. It did not feel like she thought it would. The MPs were waiting on the tarmac when the helicopter landed. 2 uniformed officers with hard faces and handcuffs ready. Behind them stood Commander Harlan himself, his dress uniform crisp despite the humidity, his expression radiating satisfaction. Chief Petty Officer Vance, he called out as she stepped off the aircraft. You're under arrest for dereliction of duty, failure to comply with a lawful order, and psychological instability rendering you unfit for service. Marlena did not respond. She simply walked toward him, flanked by Osei and 2 of his operators. Harlan's smile widened. I warned them about you, told them you were unstable. That program turned you into something broken and dangerous. Now everyone will see what I have known for 5 years. Commander Harlan, Osei's voice cut through the night air. I need you to step back. This does not concern you, Lieutenant Commander. This woman is a threat to herself and others. She abandoned her post during a psychological episode, and I have every intention of seeing her court-martialed. Osei reached into his tactical vest and pulled out a satellite phone. Then you should probably take this call first. Harlan frowned. What call? The phone rang. Osei held it out. After a long moment, Harlan took it and pressed it to his ear. His face went pale within seconds. Marlena did not know who was on the other end. She did not need to. She could see the effect in the way Harlan's shoulders stiffened, the way his jaw clenched, the way his hand began to tremble. Yes, sir, he said finally. I understand, sir. No, sir. I was not aware of the operational context. Yes, sir. Immediately, sir. He handed the phone back to Osei without looking at it. Is there a problem, Commander? Osei asked. Harlan's voice was barely a whisper. The arrest is canceled. Chief Vance is to be given full operational clearance pending debriefing. His eyes found Marlena's, and the hatred in them was bottomless. This is not over. Actually, it is. A new voice. Master Chief Reyes emerged from the shadows near the hangar, holding a tablet computer. I've been doing some research while you were gone, Commander. Fascinating reading. Your evaluation of Chief Vance during Project Phantom Tide. Your recommendation to terminate the program. Your subsequent request to have all graduates reassigned to non-operational billets. That information is classified. It was classified. Reyes handed him the tablet. Admiral Cross declassified it 6 hours ago. Her final act before entering hospice. Every evaluation, every recommendation, every lie you told to bury that program and everyone in it. Harlan stared at the screen. His face cycled through denial, anger, and finally something that looked like fear. The Admiral also included a personal statement. Reyes continued, detailing your vendetta against Chief Vance specifically, your falsified psychological assessments, your abuse of authority to suppress her career. He paused. That statement has already been forwarded to the Inspector General and the Chief of Naval Personnel. The MPs exchanged glances. One of them quietly removed his handcuffs from his belt and stepped back. Harlan looked at Marlena. His mouth opened and closed. 4 or 5 years, he had been the one with power, the one who decided her fate, the one who could make her invisible with a single negative evaluation. Now he was the one who had nowhere to hide. You should go, Commander, Osei said. I imagine you have some difficult conversations ahead. Harlan turned and walked away. His shoulders were slumped. His steps were unsteady. He did not look back. Marlena watched him go. She felt nothing. No triumph. No satisfaction. Just the quiet certainty that one chapter of her life had finally closed. 6 months later, the training facility did not exist on any official map. It sat on a remote stretch of coastline in North Carolina, surrounded by restricted airspace and guarded by personnel who would never confer its purpose. The buildings were unmarked. The vehicles were unmarked. Even the uniforms were unmarked. But the women who trained there knew exactly what they were becoming. Marlena stood at the edge of the pool and watched 12 recruits tread water. They had been in there for 40 minutes. Their muscles were screaming. Their lungs were burning. 3 of them were crying, though the water hid their tears. None of them had quit. 5 more minutes, she called out. Then we moved to breath holds. A collective groan rose from the water. Marlena allowed herself the smallest smile. She had been running the reactivated Project Phantom Tide for 4 months now. The Navy had given her full operational authority after the Voronov mission, along with a promotion to senior chief and a classified commendation that would never appear in her official record. More importantly, they had given her the resources to rebuild what had been destroyed. The new recruits were younger than she had been, stronger in some ways, weaker in others. They came from diverse backgrounds, diverse branches, united only by the specific physiological and psychological traits that made them candidates for this work. Some would wash out. Most would wash out. But the ones who remained would become something extraordinary, just as she had. Time, she called. Breath hold sequence. 2-minute baseline. Begin on my mark. 12 heads disappeared beneath the surface. Marlena walked the edge of the pool, watching for signs of distress. Most of them would make it to 2 minutes. A few would push past 3. 1 or 2 might reach 4 on their first attempt. It had taken her 6 months to reach 4 minutes. Another year to reach 6. By the end of training, she had touched 8 minutes in controlled conditions. The body could be taught to do remarkable things when the mind learned to stop fighting it. One of the recruits surfaced at the 90-second mark, gasping. A young woman named Okonkwo transferred from Navy EOD. She had the physical capability, but struggled with the psychological component. The silence underwater terrified her in ways she could not articulate. Marlena crouched at the pool's edge. What happened? I could not stop thinking. Okonkwo's voice was ragged. About the darkness. About being trapped. Marlena nodded. She remembered that fear. Remembered the moment in training when she had learned to make peace with it. The darkness is not your enemy, she said. It is your home. When you are in the water, in the black, nothing can find you. Nothing can hurt you. You are invisible. You are untouchable. The darkness is where you become powerful. Okonkwo stared at her. How do I believe that? You do not believe it. You practice it. Every day. Every dive. Until your body knows it, even when your mind forgets. Marlena stood. 3-minute holds tomorrow. I expect you in the water. She walked away before Okonkwo could respond. The administrative building sat at the north end of the facility. Marlena's office was on the second floor, a small room with a window overlooking the ocean. She spent most of her time at the pool or in the field, but there were always reports to file, assessments to complete, bureaucratic necessities that came with running a program the Navy pretended did not exist. A photograph sat on her desk. Admiral Catherine Cross in her dress whites, taken 20 years ago when she had first conceived of Phantom Tide. She had died 3 weeks after Marlena returned from the Philippines. Peacefully, according to the hospice nurses, with a smile on her face. Marlena liked to think she knew why. A knock at the door. Reese entered without waiting for permission. He had transferred to the facility 2 months ago, serving as her second in command. The earnest young operator she had met in the Philippines had grown into something steadier, something more certain. Mail call, he said. Dropped a small package on her desk. Postmarked from Arlington. Marlena opened it carefully. Inside was a folded flag, old and worn, with a handwritten note tucked beneath it. She recognized her mother's handwriting immediately. Danny would have wanted you to have this. I know you cannot tell me what you did or why you had to do it, but know it was for him. A mother knows. I am proud of you. I have always been proud of you. Come home when you can. There is an empty chair at the table that has waited long enough. Marlena read the note twice. Then she folded it carefully and placed it in her desk drawer beside the photograph of Daniel in his dress blues. You okay? Reese asked. She looked out the window at the ocean. The sun was setting, painting the water in shades of orange and gold. Somewhere out there, beneath the waves, 12 women were learning to become ghosts. I am getting there, she said. That night, after the recruits had been dismissed and the facility had gone quiet, Marlena walked down to the beach alone. The water was cold here, nothing like the warm rivers of the Philippines, but she did not mind. Cold was just information, something to acknowledge and move past. She waded in until the waves reached her chest. Then she took a breath and slipped beneath the surface. The darkness wrapped around her like an old friend. The pressure settled against her skin. The silence filled her ears, drowning out every voice except her own. She stayed under for 7 minutes and 43 seconds. Her best time yet. When she surfaced, the stars were out. The facility lights glowed in the distance. And somewhere in the water around her, the ghosts of the women who had come before seemed to whisper their approval. Marlena floated on her back and let the current carry her. The war would never end. There would always be another Voronov, another mission, another sacrifice demanded by a world that would never know her name. But for now, in this moment, she was exactly where she belonged. The water remembered her. It always had. If this story moved you, drop a comment about what resonated most. Marlena's journey, her sacrifices, or someone you know who was underestimated until they proved everyone wrong.